I was standing in my backyard admiring the morning dew on my tomato plants when I heard the unmistakable rumble of heavy machinery coming down Maple Street. It was 7:30 on a Tuesday morning in my quiet suburban neighborhood of Ridgewood, New Jersey, and the sound of a diesel engine didn't belong here. I walked around the side of my house, coffee mug still in hand, and froze. A yellow bulldozer was rolling down the street, and it was slowing down right in front of my property. Behind the wheel sat a contractor I didn't recognize, and standing on my lawn with her arms crossed and that signature scowl was Patricia Brennan, the president of our Homeowners Association. Patricia was 52 years old, always wore her blonde hair in that severe bob that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable ever since I moved into the neighborhood 3 years ago. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted, jogging toward them. My name is Nathan Daniels, and I had worked my tail off to buy this house. I was a mechanical engineer at a manufacturing plant in Newark, and this place was my sanctuary. The last thing I needed was Patricia and her power trip ruining my Tuesday morning. "Good morning, Nathan," Patricia said with that fake sweet voice she used when she was about to deliver bad news. "I'm afraid we have a situation here that requires immediate attention." "What situation?" I demanded, looking between her and the bulldozer that was now idling on the street. The contractor was checking his phone, apparently waiting for instructions. Patricia pulled out a folder from under her arm and flipped it open with dramatic flair. "According to HOA records in our recent inspection, your garden shed is encroaching on association common property by approximately 6 feet. We sent you 3 notices about this violation." My mouth fell open. "What notices? I never received anything." "We sent them to your address," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Regardless, the encroachment must be remedied immediately. Since you failed to respond to our communications, the board has authorized the removal of the structure." "You're going to bulldoze my shed?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The garden shed had been there when I bought the house. The previous owners had built it 15 years ago, and it had been properly registered with the township. "That shed has been there for 15 years. How's it suddenly encroaching?" Patricia's expression hardened. "New measurements were taken last month. The shed is clearly over the property line onto HOA common area. We have the authority to remove unauthorized structures on association property." "Common area? Patricia, that's my backyard. Show me these measurements." She pulled out a hand-drawn diagram that looked like it had been sketched on a napkin. There were no official markings, no surveyor's seal, nothing that looked remotely legitimate. "This was prepared by our landscape committee chairman." "Your landscape committee chairman isn't a licensed surveyor." My voice was rising now. Other neighbors were starting to come out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. I saw Mrs. Henderson from next door and Bob Carlisle from across the street. "The HOA covenants give us the right to maintain common areas," Patricia insisted. "If you have a problem with this, you can take it up with the board at next month's meeting." "Next month? You're about to destroy my property right now." The bulldozer operator climbed down from his machine and walked over to Patricia. "Madam, do you want me to proceed or not? I got 3 other jobs today." "Nathan, step aside," Patricia said firmly. "This is happening whether you like it or not." I pulled out my phone and started dialing. "I'm calling the police. You can't just destroy someone's property without proper legal authority." Patricia actually laughed. "Go ahead. The police can't interfere with HOA business. We have legal authority through the covenants you signed when you purchased your home." I did call the police anyway, and within 15 minutes, Officer Rodriguez arrived in his patrol car. He was a stocky guy in his 40s who I'd seen around the neighborhood before. I explained the situation while Patricia stood there with her arms crossed, looking supremely confident. Officer Rodriguez examined the paperwork Patricia had provided, then looked at me. "Mr. Daniels, do you have your property survey from when you purchased the home?" "It's inside. Give me 2 minutes." I sprinted into my house and tore through my file cabinet until I found the folder from the closing. The official survey, prepared by Meadowland Surveying Services, showed clear property lines. My shed was a full 12 feet inside my property boundary. I ran back outside and handed it to the officer. He studied it carefully, then looked at Patricia's hand-drawn diagram. "Madam, this doesn't look like an official survey." "It was prepared by our committee," Patricia said defensively. We don't need to hire an expensive surveyor for something this obvious." "Actually, you do," Officer Rodriguez said. "Mr. Daniels has an official survey showing the shed is on his property. Unless you have an equally official document showing otherwise, I can't let you proceed with demolition." Patricia's face turned red. "This is ridiculous. The HOA has authority here." "The HOA doesn't have authority to destroy private property based on a hand-drawn map," the officer said firmly. "If you proceed, Mr. Daniels can press charges for destruction of property, and you personally could be liable." The bulldozer operator threw up his hands. "Look, I'm not getting in the middle of this. You folks figure out who owns what, then call me." He climbed back into his machine and drove away, leaving deep tire tracks in Patricia's perfect lawn. The irony wasn't lost on me. After Officer Rodriguez left, Patricia stood on my front lawn, practically vibrating with rage. "This isn't over, Nathan. The board will review this matter, and I guarantee you that shed is coming down." "Bring it on," I said. "But next time, bring an actual surveyor and proper legal documentation." She stormed off to her white Lexus SUV and peeled out of my driveway. I noticed several neighbors had watched the whole thing. Mrs. Henderson gave me a sympathetic wave. Bob Carlyle walked over. "Nathan, I gotta warn you, man," Bob said quietly. "Patricia doesn't lose. She'll find a way to come at you for this." "What's her problem with me anyway?" I asked. "I keep my lawn mowed, I don't have loud parties, I follow the rules." Bob scratched his head. "Honestly, I think she's just on a power trip. She's done this to other people too. The Martins down on Oak Street had to repaint their entire house because she claimed their shutters were the wrong shade of blue. Cost them $12,000. That's insane." "Yeah, well, welcome to the Ridgewood HOA. Patricia's been president for 6 years, and nobody runs against her because she makes life hell for anyone who opposes her." I spent the rest of the day at work distracted, wondering what Patricia's next move would be. I knew Bob was right about her not giving up. People like Patricia Brennan saw any challenge to their authority as a personal attack. When I got home that evening, there was a certified letter in my mailbox. It was from the HOA's attorney, a guy named Morton Webb from some law firm in Paramus. The letter informed me that I was in violation of HOA Covenants Section 14.7 regarding unauthorized structures on common property. It demanded I remove the shed within 30 days or face daily fines of $500, with the HOA reserving the right to remove the structure at my expense. I was also being fined $1,000 for the 3 previous violations I supposedly ignored. I immediately called my own lawyer, a friend from college named Victor Martinez, who practiced real estate law in Montclair. We met for dinner that night at a diner off Route 17. "This is garbage," Victor said after reading through the letter and examining my survey. "Your shed is clearly on your property. The survey is from a licensed surveyor. It's got the official seal, and it was filed with the county. They've got nothing." "So what do?" I asked, pushing my meatloaf around my plate. My appetite had disappeared. "First, we respond to their attorney with a cease and desist. We point out that your survey proves ownership, and any further threats will result in a harassment lawsuit. Second, I'm going to request all documentation the HOA used to determine encroachment. They're required to provide that under New Jersey HOA law." "Will that stop her?" Victor sighed. "Nathan, I'm going to be honest with you. Even though you're clearly in the right, fighting an HOA can be expensive and time-consuming. They have association funds to pay their legal fees. You're paying out of pocket." "So she can just bully me into submission?" "I'm not saying that. I'm saying be prepared for this to get ugly. HOAs have a lot of power in New Jersey, and some of them abuse it, but you've got a strong case. Your property line is clearly established. If they push this, we can countersue for harassment and legal fees." Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated quickly. Victor sent the cease and desist letter to Morton Webb, who responded with an even more aggressive letter claiming the HOA's authority superseded individual property surveys. It was complete nonsense legally, but it showed Patricia wasn't backing down. Then the petty harassment started. I received a violation notice because my trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day. They were in my garage with the door partially open while I was working on my car. I got another notice claiming my lawn was 1 inch too tall, even though I had just mowed it that morning. A third notice said my mailbox post needed repainting. even though it had been painted 6 months ago and looked fine. Each violation came with a $100 fine. Patricia was clearly trying to bury me in paperwork and fees, but she made a critical mistake by overplaying her hand. When I received a notice claiming my car was inappropriately parked in my own driveway, Victor told me we had enough for a harassment case. "Nobody's going to look at this pattern and think it's legitimate enforcement," Victor said during a phone call. "She's clearly retaliating against you for standing up to her. We can use this." But before we could file anything, Patricia made her biggest move yet. It was a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the initial bulldozer incident. I was inside making breakfast when I heard metal crashing and wood splintering. I ran to my back window and couldn't believe what I saw. Patricia was behind the wheel of the bulldozer. She had somehow gotten it back, and she was personally demolishing my garden shed. The blade had already taken out one wall, and tools and equipment were scattered across my yard. I grabbed my phone and started recording as I ran outside. "Patricia, stop! What are you doing?" I was screaming, running across my yard in my pajamas and bare feet. She either didn't hear me over the engine noise or didn't care. The bulldozer lurched forward, and the entire shed collapsed in a shower of wood and shingles. She backed up and pushed forward again, grinding the debris into the ground. I was still recording, making sure to capture everything. Mrs. Henderson was in her yard with her phone out too. Bob Carlyle was running toward us. I dialed 911 while keeping my camera pointed at Patricia. "This is Nathan Daniels at 42 Maple Street in Ridgewood. The HOA president is currently using a bulldozer to destroy my property. I need police here immediately." Patricia finally noticed me. She shut off the bulldozer and climbed down, not looking even slightly apologetic. In fact, she looked triumphant. "The encroachment has been remedied," she announced loudly enough for the gathering neighbors to hear. "The HOA has removed the unauthorized structure from common property." "That was my property. You just destroyed my shed." My hands were shaking. I'd had lawn equipment in there worth thousands of dollars, not to mention tools I'd inherited from my grandfather. "I have documentation proving otherwise," Patricia said, pulling yet another folder from her enormous designer purse. "The board authorized this action. You can't just destroy someone's property because your fake board authorized it." Police cars arrived within minutes, multiple units this time. Officer Rodriguez was there again, along with 2 other officers. I showed them the video I'd just recorded and explained what happened. Patricia started in with her HOA authority speech, but Rodriguez cut her off. "Madam, we're going to need to see documentation proving the HOA owns the property where that shed was located." "I have it right here," Patricia said confidently, pulling out papers. Rodriguez examined them while the other officers took statements from me and the neighbors who had witnessed the destruction. After about 10 minutes, Rodriguez walked back over to us. "Mr. Daniels, these documents appear to be signed by HOA board members, but I don't see any official survey or property documentation, just assertions that the land belongs to the HOA." "Because it does," Patricia insisted. "Check the association plat map filed when this neighborhood was developed." "We can check that, but it's going to take time," Rodriguez said. "In the meantime, Mr. Daniels has a survey showing that shed was on his property. You've just destroyed what appears to be his private property." For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across Patricia's face. The HOA attorney approved this action. "Then the HOA attorney gave you bad advice," Rodriguez said. "I'm going to file a report on this incident. Mr. Daniels, you'll need to contact your insurance company and your attorney. Madam, I strongly suggest you contact your attorney immediately." After the police left, I stood in my backyard looking at the ruins of my shed. 15 years of structure reduced to splinters and twisted metal in about 5 minutes. My lawnmower was destroyed. My edger, my leaf blower, my hand tools, all crushed or buried in the debris. I felt physically sick. I called Victor immediately. When I described what had happened, there was a long silence on the other end. "She actually got into a bulldozer herself and demolished it?" Victor finally asked. "I've got video. So do 2 neighbors." "Nathan, this just became a criminal matter. What she did is destruction of property, possibly criminal mischief. The fact that she did it personally, not through a contractor, makes it even worse. We're filing charges and we're suing both Patricia personally and the HOA." "What if she's right, though? What if somehow the property does belong to the HOA?" Then she still needed a court order to demolish a structure. You can't just take the law into your own hands. Even if she genuinely believed the HOA owned that land, she had legal avenues to pursue. She chose to act like a vigilante instead. Victor came over that afternoon to document everything. He took dozens of photos and measurements. We went through my homeowner's insurance policy, and fortunately, my shed and its contents were covered, minus my deductible. But I wanted more than just insurance money. I wanted Patricia held accountable. On Monday, Victor filed a criminal complaint with the Ridgewood Police Department for destruction of property. He also filed a civil lawsuit against Patricia Brennan personally and the Ridgewood Homeowners Association, seeking damages for the destroyed property, emotional distress, and legal fees. The lawsuit demanded $50,000 in damages. We also filed a motion for an emergency surveying order. Victor explained that we needed an official court-ordered survey to definitively establish the property lines and shut down any questions about ownership. The judge granted it within 48 hours and appointed an independent licensed surveyor to conduct the work at the HOA's expense if the property turned out to be mine. The surveyor, a serious woman in her 60s named Margaret Cho from a firm in Hackensack, arrived on Thursday morning with her team. They spent 6 hours setting up equipment, taking measurements, and examining county records. Patricia showed up halfway through, of course, standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed. "This is a waste of time and money," she announced to anyone who would listen. "That shed was on HOA property. Everyone knows the common area extends behind those houses." Margaret ignored her completely, which I found immensely satisfying. When the survey team finally packed up, Margaret told me and Victor she'd have preliminary findings within 24 hours and a full report within a week. "I can tell you right now that your original survey appears accurate," Margaret said quietly, "but I'll confirm everything in my report." That night, I got a call from Bob Carlisle. "Hey Nathan, I thought you should know. Patricia called an emergency HOA board meeting tonight. She's trying to rally support, saying you're attacking the association." "I'm attacking her. She demolished my shed." "I know, man. I'm just giving you a heads up. Not everyone on the board is on her side." Jennifer Wong, the treasurer, looked pretty uncomfortable when Patricia was explaining what happened. The next morning, Margaret Cho sent her preliminary findings to Victor, who immediately forwarded them to me. I read through the technical language until I got to the conclusion section, and then I had to read it 3 times to make sure I understood what I was seeing. The shed had been located entirely on my property, a full 14 feet from the actual property line. But here was the shocking part. The property line between my lot and the HOA common area extended further than even my original survey had shown, because of a mapping error from 30 years ago when the neighborhood was developed. According to Margaret's research, I actually owned 3 feet of what the HOA had been maintaining as common area. But even more interesting was what she found on the other side of my property. The property line between my lot and Patricia's lot, which bordered mine on the west side, was 6 feet further onto what Patricia thought was her property than anyone realized. Patricia's decorative garden, her expensive stone pathway, and her precious koi pond were all actually on my property. She had been encroaching on my land by 6 feet, and when she demolished my shed, she had done it while standing on land that was legally mine. I started laughing when I finished reading the report. I couldn't help it. The irony was just too perfect. Patricia had been so convinced my shed was encroaching on HOA land that she never considered she might be the one with the boundary issues. Victor called me an hour later, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Did you read the survey?" "3 times. Is this for real?" Margaret is one of the best surveyors in New Jersey. She went back to the original development plans from 1994 and found a transcription error in the county records. Someone copied a number wrong, and it's been wrong ever since. Your property is actually larger than your original survey showed, and Patricia Brennan has been trespassing on your land. What do we do with this? Well, legally, that's all your property. The koi pond, the garden, the pathway, all of it. You'd be within your rights to demand she remove everything. I thought about it for a long moment. I thought about Patricia's smugness, her bullying, her absolute certainty that she was right. I thought about my demolished shed and my destroyed tools. I thought about the harassment and the threatening letters. Let's give her a chance to make this right first, I said. I want to see her face when she finds out. Victor arranged for a meeting at the HOA's community center the following Tuesday evening. Present were myself, Victor, Patricia, Morton Webb, the HOA attorney, and the other 4 members of the HOA board, Jennifer Wong, Michael Dietrich, Susan O'Malley, and Robert Ferrara. Margaret Cho was there to present her findings. Patricia walked in looking confident, like she was about to watch me get demolished. Morton Webb had his briefcase and that smug lawyer look. The other board members just looked uncomfortable. Margaret set up her laptop and projector and walked everyone through her findings. She showed the original development plans, the county records, the error in transcription, and her new measurements. She put up aerial photos with the correct property lines overlaid. I watched Patricia's face as Margaret explained how the property lines actually ran. At first, Patricia looked confused, then disbelieving, then slowly horrified as she realized what this meant. "So you're saying the shed was on Mr. Daniels's property?" Jennifer Wong asked. The shed was approximately 14 feet from the actual property line onto HOA common area, Margaret confirmed. It was entirely on Mr. Daniels' property. There was no encroachment whatsoever. "But what about the common area?" Patricia asked, her voice higher than normal. "You said there was an error. Does the HOA lose property?" "Actually, the HOA gains approximately 3 feet along Mr. Daniels's eastern boundary," Margaret said. "However, there is an issue on the western boundary." She clicked to a new image showing my property line with Patricia's house. "Mrs. Brennan, your koi pond, stone pathway, and approximately 600 square feet of your garden are actually located on Mr. Daniels's property. You're encroaching on his land by nearly 6 feet along a 100-foot boundary." The room went silent. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Morton Webb grabbed the report and started flipping through it frantically. "That's impossible," Patricia whispered. "My property survey from when I bought the house also contains the same transcription error," Margaret said. "I've verified this with the original developer's plans, which I obtained from the county archives. The error has been propagated through multiple surveys over the years. My survey corrects it." "This can't be right," Patricia said, louder now. "I've lived here for 18 years. "Mrs. Brennan, I'm a licensed professional surveyor with 27 years of experience," Margaret said calmly. "I've triple-checked these findings. I'll stake my license on their accuracy." Morton Webb was looking pale. "I need to review this with my own surveyor." "That's your right," Victor said, speaking for the first time. "But I should point out that this is a court-ordered survey conducted by a neutral third party. If you want to dispute it, you'll need to file a motion with the court." I decided it was time for me to speak. "Patricia, you destroyed my shed claiming I was encroaching on HOA property. Not only was my shed entirely on my own land, but it turns out you're the one who's been encroaching on my property for 18 years. Patricia looked like she might cry or scream or both. "I didn't know. The survey I had was wrong, just like you were wrong about my shed, but I didn't bulldoze your koi pond, did I?" "What do you want?" Morton Webb asked, clearly trying to do damage control. Victor pulled out a document. "First, the HOA will immediately withdraw all violations and fines against Mr. Daniels. Second, the HOA will issue a formal written apology. Third, Mrs. Brennan will personally apologize for destroying Mr. Daniels's property. Fourth, the HOA's insurance will pay for all damages, including Mr. Daniels's legal fees, the cost of the destroyed shed and contents, and compensation for his time and distress. We're prepared to settle for $75,000. $75,000? Michael Dietrich gasped. The shed was worth maybe $5,000. The shed was worth $8,000, Victor corrected. The contents were worth approximately $6,000. The rest covers legal fees, emotional distress, harassment, and punitive damages for the willful and illegal destruction of property." "This is extortion," Patricia shouted. "No, this is a settlement offer," Victor said coolly. "The alternative is we proceed with the civil suit and the criminal charges. Mrs. Brennan, you personally operated heavy machinery to demolish private property. That's criminal mischief in New Jersey, a 4th-degree crime. You could face up to 18 months in prison and a $10,000 fine." Patricia turned white. Morton Webb was frantically taking notes. The other board members were staring at Patricia like she'd grown a second head. "We'll need to discuss this," Morton Webb said. You have 72 hours, Victor replied. After that, the offer increases by $5,000 per day, and we move forward with all legal proceedings. We left the meeting, and I felt like I was walking on air. The look on Patricia's face had been worth everything. But I knew this wasn't over yet. The next morning, I got a phone call from Jennifer Wong, the HOA treasurer. Mr. Daniels, this is Jennifer Wong. I'm calling in my personal capacity, not as a board member. I wanted you to know that several of us are very disturbed by what Patricia did. We had no idea she was going to take that bulldozer and demolish your shed. She claimed the board authorized it, I said. She told us she was removing a small section of fence that was on HOA property. She never said anything about demolishing your entire shed with a bulldozer. If we'd known, we would have stopped her. So what happens now? Jennifer sighed. Honestly, I think Patricia needs to resign. This is beyond inappropriate. She exposed the HOA to massive liability, and she did it acting on her own authority without proper board approval. We're meeting tomorrow night to discuss this. I can't promise anything, but I wanted you to know that not everyone on that board supports what she did. I appreciate that, I said. True to her word, the HOA held an emergency board meeting the next night. I wasn't invited, but Bob Carlisle was there as a homeowner observer, and he filled me in immediately afterward. Dude, it was insane, Bob said, sitting in my living room with a beer. Patricia tried to act like she did nothing wrong. She kept saying she was protecting HOA property and that you were the problem. But Jennifer had printed out copies of the survey and passed them around. Michael Dietrich asked Patricia point blank if she had gotten board approval before taking the bulldozer, and she admitted she hadn't. What did Morton Webb say? The lawyer? He basically told them that Patricia had acted outside her authority and exposed both herself and the HOA to significant legal liability. He recommended they accept your settlement offer and that Patricia should resign. Did she? Bob grinned. Better. They voted 4-1 to remove her as president. Only she voted against it. Then they voted 4-1 to accept her resignation from the board if she offered it, and if she didn't, they were prepared to move forward with removing her entirely. She stormed out screaming about lawsuits and discrimination. Wow. Jennifer Wong is interim president now. She seems reasonable. I think they're going to accept your settlement. They did. 3 days later, Victor received a formal acceptance of the settlement terms. The HOA's insurance company would pay $75,000 to me, all violations and fines would be withdrawn and expunged from my record, and Patricia was officially no longer on the HOA board. As part of the settlement, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges, though Victor advised me to reserve that right if Patricia tried any retaliation. The check arrived 2 weeks later. I used part of it to build a new shed, even bigger and better than the old one, with a concrete foundation and proper electrical hookup. I replaced all my equipment with upgraded versions. I still had over $40,000 left after covering all my expenses, but the property line issue with Patricia still wasn't resolved. According to the survey, 600 square feet of her yard, including her expensive koi pond, were on my property. Victor sent a formal letter to Patricia's new attorney informing her of the encroachment and demanding she remove the structures from my property. Her attorney responded with a claim of adverse possession, arguing that Patricia had maintained the area openly and continuously for 18 years, giving her legal claim to it. Victor laughed when he read that. New Jersey requires 20 years of continuous adverse possession, and it can't be based on a mistake in the survey. She's got nothing, Victor explained. We went back to court, this time for a hearing on the property line dispute. Patricia showed up with her attorney, looking haggard and angry. The judge reviewed Margaret's survey, reviewed Patricia's adverse possession claim, and made his ruling from the bench. Mrs. Brennan, your adverse possession claim fails because you have not met the 20-year statutory requirement, and your possession was based on a mutual mistake regarding the property line, not an intentional claim of ownership. The survey conducted by Mrs. Cho is thorough and properly supported. I find that the disputed area is part of Mr. Daniels's property. You have 90 days to remove any structures or vegetation you wish to keep. After that time, anything remaining becomes Mr. Daniels's property. Patricia stood up, her voice shaking. Your Honor, that koi pond cost me $30,000. The stone pathway was $15,000. I can't just move them. You should have ensured they were on your property before installing them, the judge said, not unkindly. I'm giving you 90 days, which is generous. Use that time wisely. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of victory and exhaustion. I'd won, completely and totally, but it had taken months of stress and fighting. Victor put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, Nathan. You stood up to a bully and won. I just wanted to live in my house peacefully, I said. That's what makes this right. You weren't looking for a fight. She brought it to you. Over the next 90 days, I watched as Patricia's yard was systematically dismantled. A crew came to drain and remove the koi pond. The fish were relocated, though I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that half of them died in the move because Patricia had waited until the last minute to arrange it. The stone pathway was jackhammered up. The garden was cleared. Patricia put her house on the market 60 days after the court ruling. I heard she accepted an offer well below asking price because the property line issue had to be disclosed to buyers. She moved to a condo in Fort Lee, and I never saw her again. The HOA, under Jennifer Wong's leadership, turned out to be completely different. Jennifer sent out a newsletter apologizing to the neighborhood for the previous board's overreach and promising a more collaborative approach. She established clear procedures for violations that included multiple notices and opportunities to cure before any fines were imposed. Several longtime residents told me it was like night and day compared to Patricia's reign. I decided not to do anything with the extra land I'd gained from Patricia's yard. I had the whole area landscaped with native plants and a nice flower garden. It actually improved my property value significantly. Where her koi pond had been, I planted a Japanese maple tree. It seemed fitting somehow. About 6 months after everything was settled, I was working in my new shed when Mrs. Henderson came over with a plate of cookies. She was a sweet woman in her 70s who had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. Nathan, I wanted to thank you, she said. Thank me? For what? For standing up to Patricia. She's terrorized this neighborhood for years. My husband and I talked about moving because of her, but we've been here so long. When you fought back and won, it changed everything. Jennifer is wonderful, and the HOA is actually helpful now instead of threatening. I just didn't want my shed destroyed, I said. It was more than that. You showed everyone that bullies can be stopped if you're willing to stand up to them. Half the neighborhood wanted to help you during that fight, but we were all too scared of Patricia. You did it anyway. After she left, I sat in my new shed thinking about everything that had happened. I'd moved to Ridgewood looking for a quiet suburban life. Instead, I'd gotten dragged into a war with an HOA president who thought she was above the law. It had cost me time, money, and a lot of stress. But I'd won. More importantly, I'd helped fix a broken system. The HOA wasn't perfect under Jennifer's leadership, but it was functional and fair. People weren't living in fear of arbitrary violations and harassment anymore. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondering if she'd learned anything from the experience. Probably not. People like her rarely did. She'd probably convinced herself that she was the victim, that I had somehow wronged her. The irony that she'd been encroaching on my property while accusing me of encroachment was probably lost on her entirely. About a year after the settlement, I was having a barbecue in my backyard with some neighbors. Bob Carlisle was there, along with Mrs. Henderson and her husband, and a few other folks from the street. We were standing around my new shed, which had become something of a neighborhood landmark, when Bob raised his beer. A toast, he said, to Nathan, who took on the dragon and won. Everyone laughed and clinked bottles. I looked around at my neighbors, my property, my rebuilt shed, and felt genuinely content. It had been a hell of a fight, but I'd come out the other side with more than I'd started with, not just the settlement money or the extra land, but the respect of my community and the knowledge that I could stand up for myself when it mattered. The Japanese maple I'd planted where Patricia's koi pond used to be was starting to really take root. Its leaves were that beautiful red color they get in the spring. I'd chosen that tree specifically because Japanese maples live for decades, sometimes centuries, if they're well cared for. Long after I was gone, that tree would still be there, a living reminder that property rights matter and that bullies don't always win. My phone buzzed with a text from Victor. Saw Patricia listed as defendant in another lawsuit, this time in Fort Lee. Some dispute with her condo association. Some people never learn. I texted back a laughing emoji and put my phone away. That was Patricia's problem now, not mine. I had a backyard full of friends, a perfectly legal shed on my perfectly documented property, and a cold beer in my hand. The sun was setting over Ridgewood, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I could hear kids playing down the street and someone mowing their lawn a few houses over. Normal suburban sounds, peaceful sounds, exactly what I'd wanted when I bought this house. Jennifer Wong stopped by the barbecue, bringing potato salad. As the new HOA president, she'd made a point of actually getting to know the residents instead of just sending them violation notices. "Nathan, the board wanted me to let you know we're officially closing the file on the property line dispute," she said. "Everything's been updated in the county records. Your property dimensions are now correctly recorded." "Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks for running the HOA like a normal person," she laughed. "That's a low bar, but I'll take it. Honestly, what Patricia did to you was so far over the line. The whole board was horrified when we found out the truth. She'd been telling us she had proper documentation, that you were being difficult, that the shed was clearly on HOA property. We trusted her because she'd been president for so long. Lesson learned, I guess." "Definitely. We've implemented new rules now. Any enforcement action over $500 has to be approved by a majority of the board, and we have to have proper documentation. No more taking Patricia's word for things." As the evening wore on, and my neighbors gradually headed home, I found myself alone in my backyard, looking at the space where my old shed had been demolished. The new shed was 20 feet away, bigger and better, but I could still see the scars in the ground where Patricia had driven that bulldozer. I thought about that morning, standing in my pajamas watching her destroy my property. The shock and anger I'd felt. The violation of having someone tear down something that was mine, that I'd taken care of, that held my grandfather's tools and my own memories of weekend projects. Patricia had been so certain she was right. That certainty had driven her to commit what was essentially vandalism with heavy machinery. She'd been so convinced of her own authority, her own righteousness, that she couldn't conceive of being wrong. And when she was proven wrong, when the survey showed that not only was my shed properly on my property, but she was the one encroaching on me, she still couldn't accept it. She'd fought tooth and nail, claimed adverse possession, hired lawyers, and ultimately had to sell her house at a loss because of her own stubbornness. There was probably a lesson there about humility and certainty, about the danger of power without accountability. But I wasn't a philosopher. I was just a mechanical engineer who wanted to keep his shed. My phone rang. It was my mom calling from Florida, where she'd retired last year. "Nathan, I was just thinking about you. How's everything going with the house?" "It's good, Mom. Really good." "Did you ever resolve that thing with the crazy HOA lady?" I laughed. "Yeah, that's all settled now. Long story, but I won." "Of course you did. Your father would be proud of you, standing up for yourself like that." My dad had passed away 5 years ago. He'd been a union steward at his plant, always fighting for workers' rights, never backing down when he knew he was right. I'd thought about him a lot during the fight with Patricia. Thanks, Mom. How's Florida treating you?" We talked for a while about her new condo, her friends, the weather. Normal stuff. When we hung up, I felt a wave of gratitude for my relatively boring, drama-free life now that the Patricia situation was resolved. The next morning, I was heading to work when I saw a moving truck in front of Patricia's old house. The new owners were moving in. I'd heard through Bob that they were a young couple with a baby, first-time homebuyers who'd gotten a good deal because of Patricia's desperation to sell. I walked over to introduce myself. The husband, a guy about my age in a college sweatshirt, was directing the movers. "Hey, hi, I'm Nathan. I live next door." "Oh, hey, I'm Chris. My wife Amy is inside with the baby. We're so excited to be here." "Welcome to the neighborhood. It's a good street." "Thanks. Hey, the previous owner seemed really bitter about something when we closed. She made some comment about the property line. Do we need to worry about that?" I explained the situation as diplomatically as I could, leaving out most of Patricia's craziness. Chris's eyes widened. "So that's why there was all that torn-up ground in the backyard. We were wondering about that." "Yeah, that was her koi pond and garden. They were actually on my property, so she had to remove them." "Wow. Well, Good thing we don't have any plans for major landscaping right away. We'll make sure to check the survey before we do anything. That's smart. Let me know if you need any recommendations for contractors or anything. And welcome again. As I drove to work, I thought about how different this interaction had been from my first meeting with Patricia. She'd shown up at my door 3 days after I moved in with a binder full of HOA rules and a list of violations she'd already identified with my property. My grass was a 1/4 inch too long, my mailbox needed cleaning, and my trash cans were positioned incorrectly. I'd fixed everything she mentioned because I wanted to be a good neighbor, but nothing I did was ever good enough for Patricia. She was the kind of person who needed someone to control, someone to criticize. When I finally stood up to her over the shed, it had probably felt like a personal betrayal to her warped worldview. Work was busy, which was good. I needed the distraction. I was in the middle of troubleshooting a manufacturing issue when my personal cell rang. It was Victor. "Nathan, thought you'd want to know. Patricia's attorney just filed a notice of appeal on the property line ruling." My stomach dropped. "Are you kidding me? She already sold the house." "I know. It's a spite appeal. She has no standing anymore since she doesn't own the property, so it'll get dismissed. But she's trying to drag this out and cost you more legal fees." "Can she do that?" "She can file it, but the appeals court will likely dismiss it for lack of standing within a few weeks. Don't worry, the settlement covered your legal fees, remember? This is just her last gasp." He was right. 3 weeks later, the appeals court dismissed Patricia's appeal in a 2-page ruling that basically said she had no legal standing to appeal since she no longer owned the property and the new owners had no interest in pursuing the matter. I never heard from Patricia or her attorney again. Summer turned to fall, and life in Ridgewood settled into a comfortable routine. The new HOA board under Jennifer's leadership was doing a good job. They repaved some streets, updated the neighborhood entrance sign, and organized a fall festival that actually brought people together instead of just sending them violation notices. I started dating someone I met at a friend's party. Her name was Zoe Johnson, and she was a teacher at the high school in Paramus. When I told her the whole story about Patricia and the shed, she laughed so hard she snorted wine out her nose. I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "It's not funny. But the idea of this middle-aged woman personally driving a bulldozer to destroy your shed because she was so convinced she was right, and then it turned out her koi pond was on your property the whole time, that's like something from a comedy movie." "It was pretty surreal while it was happening," I admitted. "I'm glad you stood up to her. Too many people just let bullies get away with things because fighting back is hard." Zoe and I kept seeing each other, and things got serious pretty quickly. She basically moved into my place after about 6 months. We were sitting in the backyard one evening in early spring, almost 2 years after the whole Patricia incident, when she asked me something I hadn't really thought about. "Do you ever feel weird about the fact that you essentially won this property by fighting?" she asked, gesturing at the area that used to be Patricia's. "I didn't win it by fighting," I said. "I won it because it was already mine. The survey just proved what was already legally true." "But you gained land that Patricia thought was hers. Does that feel strange?" I thought about it. Honestly, no. Patricia spent 18 years maintaining that land, but she never bothered to verify it was actually hers. She just assumed. And when she thought I was encroaching on HOA land, she didn't verify that either. She just assumed, and she used that assumption to justify destroying my property. If she'd been right, maybe I'd feel differently. But she was wrong about everything, and she refused to even consider she might be wrong. "That's fair," or Zoe said. "I guess I just wonder if she feels bad now, if she realizes what she did." I doubt it. People like Patricia don't do self-reflection. They're always the victim in their own story. Victor called a few days later with news. "Remember how I told you Patricia was in another lawsuit with her condo association?" "Yeah?" "She lost. They fined her $15,000 for unauthorized modifications to her unit. Apparently, she knocked down a wall that was load-bearing without getting approval. She tried to fight it, but the judge ruled against her. Some people never learn. That's what I thought. Anyway, I wanted to let you know that all your legal matters are officially closed. The appeals period is passed, the settlement is paid, everything's done. You're free and clear." "Thanks for everything, Victor. I couldn't have done this without you. That's what friends are for. Plus, This was one of the most satisfying cases I've worked on. Bullies need to be held accountable. That summer, Zoe and I got engaged. We decided to have a small backyard wedding, right there on my property. It felt fitting somehow, celebrating a new beginning in a place I'd fought so hard to protect. The day of the wedding was perfect. Clear skies, warm but not hot, a gentle breeze. We set up chairs on the lawn, right next to my rebuilt shed. Jennifer Wong came, as did Bob Carlisle and Mrs. Henderson and most of the neighborhood. Even Chris and Amy from Patricia's old house came with their toddler. During the reception, Bob gave a toast that made everyone laugh. To Nathan and Zoe, may their property lines always be clearly marked, their surveys always be accurate, and may they never have to deal with an HOA president named Patricia. Everyone raised their glasses. I looked around at my friends and neighbors, at Zoe beaming beside me, at the shed I'd rebuilt and the garden I'd planted. Life was good. Not because I'd won some fight with Patricia, but because I'd stood up for myself when it mattered and built a life I was proud of. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Zoe and I were cleaning up, she found me standing by the Japanese maple tree I'd planted where Patricia's koi pond used to be. "Thinking about everything?" she asked, slipping her hand into mine. "Yeah, it's just crazy how one incident can spiral into this whole thing. If Patricia had just checked her facts before bringing that bulldozer, none of this would have happened. But then you wouldn't have stood up to her. The HOA would still be terrible, and you wouldn't have this beautiful tree." I smiled. "True. I guess everything worked out how it was supposed to." "That's very zen of you." "I have my moments." We stood there for a while, looking at the tree in the moonlight. Its leaves rustled in the night breeze. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Normal neighborhood sounds. I thought about Patricia one last time, wondering where she was and whether she ever thought about what happened. Probably not. She'd probably convinced herself that I was the villain, that she'd been wronged somehow. That's what people like her did. They rewrote history to make themselves the hero or the victim, but never the aggressor. But I didn't need Patricia's acknowledgement or apology. I had the truth, documented in official surveys and court rulings. I had my property, my home, my new wife, and my community. That was enough. The next morning, I was checking my email when I saw a notification from the Ridgewood local news website. Out of curiosity, I clicked on it. The headline made me laugh out loud. "Former HOA president fined for violating condo association rules." The article detailed Patricia's ongoing legal troubles with her condo association in Fort Lee. Apparently, the unauthorized wall removal was just the beginning. She'd also been cited for excessive noise complaints, improper use of common areas, and harassing other residents. The condo board had voted to fine her $25,000 total, and she was threatening to sue. "History repeats itself," I said to Zoe, showing her the article. "Some people are just determined to be miserable," she said. "Good thing that's not our problem anymore." She was right. Patricia was someone else's problem now. My life had moved on. I had a wife, a career I enjoyed, a home I loved, and a community I was part of. The shed that Patricia had destroyed was now just a story I told, one that got better with each retelling. I walked out to my rebuilt shed, bigger and better than before, and started organizing my tools. I had a weekend project planned, building a raised garden bed for Zoe's vegetables. As I measured and cut lumber, I thought about how therapeutic this was. Creating something with my own hands on my own property without anyone threatening to tear it down. The shed stood solid and strong, properly permitted and documented, exactly where it belonged. On my land. 14 feet from the property line, just like the survey showed. No encroachment, no violations, no Karren with a bulldozer trying to destroy it. I smiled and kept working, the sound of my saw cutting through the morning air, building something that would last.